The Fujifilm X100V is my favourite camera I have ever owned. So why did I sell it? So welcome back to the channel. Today, as I'm sure you got from the brief intro, is talking about the X100V. It's by far my favourite camera I have ever owned, and ultimately I ended up selling it because it was not right for me. So I believed the hype, I watched all the YouTube videos, I got sucked in by all of the influencers, and I went on the hunt to find this rare and elusive mythical camera to see if it was cracked up to be, and ultimately for me it wasn't. So why did I look for one in the first place? So I started, well not started with, but I was on a Sony A7 III and I had a Sigma 24-70 lens. So by all means not a cheap camera or a cheap lens, they were amazing. The photo and video quality from both was excellent. But the main type of photography I do is with the family. We go on days out, we go around things, hence this YouTube channel, and our second YouTube channel we got is about documenting things we do, the tech we love, and going out and visiting places. And ultimately with that camera, it was big and it was heavy. It's a full frame camera, the lens is big, the lens is heavy, and to just have that with me at all times was not practical. And I would often find myself in situations where I didn't have a professional camera with me and only have my phone. I'll be snapping photos, and yes, phone cameras have come a long way, but ultimately it's not the same level of quality, the same level of detail you get on a professional camera. So I wanted to find a camera that was more portable, I could have with me all the time to be capturing those moments with myself and with my family. So I started the hunt. I wanted a camera that was small. I wanted a camera that not just was small but still had manual controls and still had dials to change settings. I wanted a camera that would still take excellent photos. Image quality is something I wasn't willing to sacrifice. You know, I would happily lug around the larger camera if it meant that by going to a smaller camera I would really sacrifice quality. I was happy to lose some of the full frame quality elements. So I settled on APS-C. I thought APS-C would be the right balance between a compact form factor of the camera, something that's portable I can take with me on a daily basis, but also still give me the quality I'm desiring, and the ability to have a lens with a small aperture, or a large aperture should I say, sorry, so I can have that small f-stop number, get a bit of a blurred background, separate the images, separate the foreground and the background, and get some nice bokeh, because ultimately that's what I like in a photo. So the search began, and first of all I thought, oh, you know what, I'll go to the Sony Alpha 6000 series. I had an A6000 camera, had it for probably 3 years, loved it, brilliant camera. I've actually got photos up around the house that I took with that camera. So straight away my mind went, okay, let's revisit this series, let's have a look at those cameras. And I was like, okay, the A6400 with a couple of lenses seems to be in the budget I want. Went to have a look at one in the shops, and to be honest, it felt like an A6000. It felt like I was stepping back to a cheap, basic, entry-level camera. The body felt cheap, the menu and the controls felt outdated, and doing some YouTube videos, looking at the video quality, the rolling shutter was very bad on it. Autofocus, amazing, but yeah, not great. So kept looking, and actually a colleague at work was very into Fujifilm. They had an X-T3, and it was like, have you heard of the X100V? I was like, you know what, no, I haven't heard of an X100V. Started googling it, and immediately all these articles coming up with this mythical camera, this one camera to rule them all the YouTube videos started coming up, and I got sucked in. I started watching them, went down the rabbit hole, and probably 20-30 videos later of reviewers and photographers talking about this camera, I was sold. I was hooked. Fujifilm color science, get these amazing photos. The X100 range is the best day-to-day, carry everywhere family camera. Fantastic, exactly what I was looking for. It's got a new processor, so it gets amazing images, and it's improved its autofocus. It's got an amazing lens, you know, 20mm f2, fantastic, exactly what I want. Manual controls and dials, and everyone just says it's a joy to shoot with. Perfect. So I went on the hunt, I started trying to find one, took a few weeks, I eventually found somewhere that had one in stock, got it delivered, picked it up, and we were actually going to a wedding the day after I had this camera delivered, and I was like, fantastic, chance to use it, shoot some pictures of the kids at the wedding, shoot some pictures of the wedding, and it's just a chance to play and get used to the camera. So that evening I spent a long time setting the camera up, getting used to using it, and actually that was really nice and really easy. It felt incredible in my hands. The manual controls on top of the Fuji cameras are second to none in my opinion. Absolutely wonderful camera to use, and shooting in full manual was a dream. It was a lovely camera. Great. Went to the wedding. We actually drove all the way to Wales. It was a long way away. Sat down, and as the ceremony was happening, I was taking some pictures of my kids and their reaction, and wasn't paying attention to the photos because obviously we were in the moment of everything going on. Once the ceremony finished, we had a bit of quiet time. I was looking back over the photos, and maybe 1 of 5 was in focus. Really, really poor autofocus performance. And I thought, you know what? It must be me. I must have not set the camera up right. I must not be shooting right with it. Let's have a look. So there was a quiet period between the ceremony and obviously the wedding breakfast. So I went on YouTube, went online, and I watched some videos, and I picked up some information, some tweaks. And I probably should have caught on to the fact that there's lots of videos on how to fix the autofocus on an X100V, lots of articles on how to fix the autofocus. Why do all these people need to fix the autofocus on the X100V? But I didn't think into that at the time. Ultimately looked at all the tips and all the advice from all these different places, put it all together, changed all the settings, right, that's it, I'm going to nail this now. Started taking some more pictures of my kids. 10 photos, 1 in focus. 20 photos, 4 in focus. What's going on? Now, if you've got a photo of scenery, so street photography, if you've got a photo of an adult who's moving, you know, in a relatively slow way as I am now, fantastic, amazing photos. But you've got kids, you know, my daughter's 3, my son is 8, running around, interacting with people, doing things, coming from the Sony a7 III, and don't get me wrong, it's a bit of an unfair comparison between the two. That's got an outstanding autofocus system. I'll be honest, this was rubbish. Really, really poor. And ultimately, I needed a camera that can be with me every day to take photos of my kids, and if I'm only going to get 1 in 10 photos, is that really the camera I want? So I persevered, I stayed with it. A few holidays later, a few days out later, still not getting the performance I want, and actually I'd got to the stage where when I wanted to nail that shot, when I knew I wanted that memory, I was taking my phone out of my pocket rather than picking up my camera, and that's not a good place to be. So ultimately it had to go. Had to go. I will caveat here that I shoot RAW as well, so the Fuji color science didn't do a huge amount for me. I wasn't using the film simulations, but yeah, it had to go. It was such a nice camera to use, a joy to hold, a joy to shoot with. It felt alive in your hands and really made you passionate about taking photos. It was incredible from that point of view, but in my opinion, for the type of photography that I do, it was awful. And I don't regret selling it at all. So what did I move to from that point onwards? Well, I'd already done a lot of research over this period of what could I go back to. Do I go back to the a7 III? Do I go back to a Sony line, the APS-C line, the A6000 series? Couldn't quite decide. And then the M50 keeps coming up and up and up, because I wanted to have something for better videos for YouTube as well. And the M50 Mark II, M50 Mark II, and it just wasn't doing it for me. It wasn't hitting the right buttons. And then I discovered the M6 Mark II. And actually I went to look at one, and the build quality is really good. It feels great in the hand. It doesn't have the viewfinder, which a lot of people don't like, but actually it makes it more compact and easier to take with you on a day-to-day basis. It's probably the most compact camera I've used since I've moved to APS-C range of cameras. I mean, it reminds me a lot of like the Sony A5100 series, all the way back there, but with the added benefit I can just slot on that viewfinder on top when I do want it, and it's there. I know that the EOS M or the EFM mount is dying, if not dead already, so there's probably unlikely to be many new lenses for this camera. However, I ultimately wanted the lens that I'm shooting on now, which is the 22mm f2, that gives the very similar field of view and certainly the same depth of field to the Fuji, and I wanted something that's going to take good, clear, detailed photos, and the higher resolution of the sensor in this camera and Canon's colour science and the dual pixel autofocus sold me. So I picked up the camera and I have had no regrets. It's been fantastic. On family days out, I'm probably getting 90 to 95% of my photos in focus of kids running around and interacting with things. The colour science is fantastic. The detail is incredible from this sensor, much better than the Fuji. Obviously it's a higher megapixel count, and actually the autofocus is so good that I'm not taking my phone out of my pocket anymore. I'm using the camera, I'm taking it with me all the time, which is exactly what I wanted this camera for. And the other thing that I find really good with this camera actually is the dynamic range. I thought the dynamic range on the X100V was quite poor. So I could take a picture in broad daylight and the sky more often than not, no matter how good you are at dialing in the exposure, to be able to expose the foreground and the background and the skies, there'd obviously often be clipped highlights, and it was quite frustrating. It was fine if you're just, you know, for like everyday snaps, it's not the end of the world, but it can be frustrating, and actually the Canon M6 II nails that. The dynamic range is brilliant, and it's a camera I highly recommend for more people. I think it's a very underlooked at camera and under hyped up camera, but it's been fantastic, and I'm very happy I made the choice. But that's why I decided to sell the X100V. It wasn't for me. That's not to say it's not a good camera. It's a fantastic camera. As I say, it's my favourite camera I've ever owned, and that's due to the build quality and the feel when you're using the camera. No camera has ever made me feel so passionate about taking a photo and about dialing in the manual settings. It's absolutely incredible for that, but the autofocus performance is, to put it simply, shocking. I've used £200 cameras that have got better autofocus, and that's ultimately why I sold it. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're in a similar boat to me and you're looking for an everyday camera for your family pictures, but with the full manual control, the choice of lenses, good quality, highly recommend the Canon M6 II. But thanks for watching. See you in the next one.